The officer hunched over his partner's body. He was bleeding out, shot by an assault rifle. A few feet away in the bushes lay a dead man. He was a marijuana grower tied to organized crime. The second one, the one who had managed to aim his weapon at the officer, was now running from him through the woods. The officer waited for the helicopter. He didn't know if it would arrive before his partner passed out. Nearby, a plantation stretched out 23,000 plants growing right in the Sierra Azul Preserve. It was August 5th, 2005. As the task force entered the plantation grounds, they walked into an ambush. Cartel gunmen guarding their multi-million-dollar operation opened fire first. A shootout broke out. A bullet from a Kalashnikov rifle tore through the young officer's legs. He had to wait 3 agonizing hours for evacuation. This was the first time in history that a U.S. law enforcement officer got wounded and almost killed by a bullet from an illegal marijuana grower. Then came other stories: shootouts, chases, bodies hidden in ravines. The armed men defended their fields. The officers defended the law. So today, let's talk about what the cartels are doing to America's forests. But first, as always, coffee. Just an unobtrusive reminder to do something under the video, in case you forget. The year was 2012. Early in the morning, just before dawn, armed agents gathered on a dusty field in Kern County. Camouflage, bulletproof vests, rifles on their backs, hushed orders. Move quietly, no sudden movements, weapons loaded. No one knew what awaited them. Drug dealers with guns or exhausted workers sleeping in the bushes on torn-up mattresses. 20 minutes after driving without headlights on the rough road, the pickup stopped 1 mile from the target. The agents fanned out across the slopes. 2 agents with night vision gear took positions on the ridge to monitor the canyon. Not a single person was getting away. The rest hid in the sumac thickets, waiting for the signal. The operation was supposed to start at the same time as the raid in Bakersfield, where the gang's leaders were being rounded up that very morning. The officers didn't know how many people were left on the plantation. The aircraft thermal cameras didn't spot anyone, and the trail cameras hadn't picked up any movement in over a week. It was entirely possible the cartel's farmers had already harvested and left. Or maybe not. The group moved forward, spreading out through the thick brush. A Forest Service agent released the shepherd dog, and it immediately picked up the trail. A few minutes later, it started barking furiously. "We've got movement! Hands up!" the agent shouted. And scenes like this became commonplace in California. They're part of a costly and exhausting campaign to wipe out marijuana plantations and dismantle the shadowy groups behind them. Since the early 2000s, illegal marijuana plantations started popping up like crazy across U.S. lands. This was a direct result of the medical cannabis boom. The market grew, demand shot up, and so did the black market. In 2001, California seized a few 100,000 plants. By 2010, that number hit 7.4 million. And most of these plantations are still hidden in national forests. In 2016, staff from the Forest Service and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife recorded over 1.5 million plants on public lands. That was 50% more than the year before, with some areas going unnoticed for years. By 2017, in the state of California alone, there were between 3,000 and 4,000 hidden plantations controlled by Mexican cartels. Many of them are deep in the woods, impossible to reach in a single day, but some are just 1 mile from the highway. Still, they're hard to spot from the air. It's all because the thick tree canopy hides the clearings, terrace slopes, makeshift irrigation systems, and bags of chemicals scattered along the trails. The forest covers up the crime. However, researchers and forest rangers warn the consequences of these crimes for the forests themselves can last for generations. The water and wildlife of the country are slowly being poisoned by insecticides and other chemicals used to grow marijuana. Every year, hundreds of new grow sites pop up across California's 20 million acres of national forest. The soil erodes, the water gets contaminated, and the land is left with pits, dumps, bullet casings, empty propane tanks. This is what a billion-dollar black market looks like. About 95% of illegal crops on state land are under the control of foreign drug traffickers. Among them are the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG, also known as the Jalisco cartel. And these organizations clearly have plenty of money. To set up plantations and tend to the plants, the cartels hire up to 10,000 people. The growers are usually armed. Plus, they have a tactical advantage. They know the terrain, hear outsiders approaching, and rarely operate alone. So, locals who accidentally stumble upon these plantations risk getting injured or killed. even on their own land. Law enforcement, including Forest Service officers and DEA agents tracking these plantations, face the highest risk of death on the job. Compared to all other units. Yeah, it's that dangerous of a job. To get a better idea of what these plantations look like, let's check out one that was discovered deep in California's Shasta Trinity National Forest back in 2019. Back then, a team of armed Forest Service agents had to hike down a steep slope above a creek, push through thickets of Douglas fir, madrona, and maples just to reach the grow site. The place looked pretty standard. Hand-cut terraces carved into the hillside, the land was scarred with signs of fire, and the burnt trees and fresh growth partly hid the site from aerial view. Around the plantation, they found about 2,800 pounds of trash. Old clothes, empty propane tanks, plastic bottles, food waste, ripped open fertilizer bags, and used commercial insecticide bottles. Plus nearly 3 miles of plastic irrigation pipes. All of it suggested the site had been in use for a long time, maybe years. The Forest Service had to haul out a good chunk of the garbage by helicopter. The cartel members themselves don't worry about such things. For them, marijuana plantations are just business. Big, well-organized, and extremely profitable. At the Shasta Trinity plot I just mentioned, they were growing around 9,000 plants. The whole harvest was estimated to be worth about $1.5 million, and that's at 2019 prices. Today, the profits from that site are likely way higher. On average, one such plantation has about 2,000 plants and yields thousands of pounds of marijuana. New cannabis strains allow growers to harvest more product from a single plant, meaning bigger profits for criminals. But setting up such a plantation, of course, requires serious investment, because it's not just a patch of bushes in the middle of the woods that you can plant and forget. No, you need miles of irrigation pipes, tons of fertilizer, logistics, planning, and manpower, including armed guards who live on site all season. Some plantations are also protected with traps, like camouflaged pits with spiked stakes. These traps don't cost much, but setting them up still takes time. In the end, a single drug network can invest anywhere from $250K to $500K in one harvest, then make 2 or 3 times that much. And even though the Forest Service keeps raiding the sites, losing a few plots to the authorities is just part of the cost of doing business. The cartels set up dozens of plantations, fully expecting some to get discovered. But the profits from the rest more than cover those losses. When it comes to plantation locations, cartels have their preferences. The main growing spots are Trinity, Mendocino, and Humboldt counties. Together, they form the so-called Emerald Triangle, a mountainous, densely forested area in Northern California, known for both legal and illegal marijuana production. Cartels enjoy perfect conditions here: remote location, rugged terrain, natural camouflage. Even from the air, from a police helicopter, illegal fields look just like legal ones. To figure it out, law enforcement has to cross-check geodata and verify every permit. And in Trinity County alone, there are about 380 permits, active and pending. There are other convenient spots too. For instance, criminals love remote areas on reservations. The risk of getting caught there is minimal. Understanding the scale of the problem, the U.S. created a special unit to take on cartel-run marijuana plantations, the Marijuana Enforcement Team, or MET. It was formed under the Department of Wildlife and includes tactically trained officers, snipers, survival specialists, canine units, as well as helicopter support and National Guard troops. All in all, a seriously large-scale operation. The squad was given 3 main tasks. First, arresting criminals to bring them to justice. Second, destroying the crops, usually poisonous and highly toxic, before they hit the black market. And finally, third, restoring the environment in the growing areas, meaning removing drainage systems and camps, cleaning up toxins, waste, all that kind of stuff. The numbers from the first 5 years alone were staggering. MET conducted 800 raids, wiped out 3 million cannabis plants, and nearly 30 tons of processed product intended for sale. There were 973 arrests, 90% of them illegal Mexican immigrants linked to the cartel. They also confiscated more than 600 guns. Beyond that, the unit cleared nearly 450 tons of waste and chemicals, ripped out 282 miles of irrigation lines, and dismantled 793 makeshift dams used to siphon water at the height of California's drought. Yet all this is just a fraction of the harm. The worst damage happens in the most isolated and fragile zones, including tribal lands. Despite the work of the Met and the efforts of other agencies, there still aren't enough resources. There are thousands of illegal producers, and they know full well they outnumber the cops and rangers, especially in places like Trinity County, where the mountains, forests, and weak infrastructure make the task nearly impossible. The county stretches about 4 hours from south to north, and as for sheriff deputies, if you count them all, there are just 22. That's the 2023 data. Often only 2 are on duty across an area larger than 3,000 square miles. That's almost twice the size of Rhode Island. If the cartel farmers are posted up high in the hills, they can hear the police convoys coming from miles away and see the dust clouds on the roads. That gives the criminals plenty of time to disappear into the woods before the first cop car even shows up, avoiding arrest. Sometimes you'll find graffiti at the plantations, like on a white truck where it said CDS Patrula in Spanish. That is Sinaloa Cartel Patrol. That kind of tagging is everywhere in Mexico just to intimidate people. I'm pretty sure in California they're doing the same thing. But it's not just about the numbers. The cartels actively sabotage the authorities' work and do everything to make catching them as hard as possible. For example, roads leading to plantations are often deliberately wrecked. They turn into bumpy trails with deep potholes where police SUVs have to creep along at 10 miles per hour. Driving like this not only wastes time, but also makes the whole convoy obvious, kicking up dust and noise. Meanwhile, the growers themselves move freely through the mountains since they're used to extreme driving. Sometimes cartels also deliberately remove road signs to confuse travelers. In other cases, investigators have found assault rifles with scopes and homemade silencers, military-grade body armor, as well as guard dogs on site. Usually these dogs are in really bad shape. But it's not just dogs on the plantations that suffer. In national forests, the bodies of wild animals are found all the time. Foxes, cougars, deer, bears, they all fall victim to the poisons cartels use to protect their crops. The poison is laid out for insects and rodents that damage the harvest, but in the end it affects everyone, especially if it's one of the deadliest poisons, carbofuran. It's banned in the US, EU, and Canada, but still widely used in many other countries, including Mexico. A 1/4 teaspoon of carbofuran is enough to kill a 286-pound black bear. Imagine what it does to smaller animals. And this substance lingers in the ecosystem for a long time. It's been found in soil, in plants, in cannabis, in water, on tools, and even on local vegetation. Pick any part of the forest near the plantation, and you'll almost certainly find traces of the poison. Carbofuran is so toxic it even kills flies that land on rotting meat. Obviously, even a tiny dose can kill a person. But they don't just use carbofuran. Bromethalin is also commonly used, a deadly rat poison for rodents gnawing on cannabis stalks for moisture. But they don't just use carbofuran. Bromethalin is also commonly used, a deadly rat poison for rodents gnawing on cannabis stalks for moisture. The poisoning works like a domino effect. First, a small animal gets hit, then a predator scavenges it and drops dead too. Sometimes it doesn't stop there, like that one time they found a fox and a vulture close by. The fox went first and the bird followed, all because it ate the poisoned meat. California Rangers regularly document such cases, not just in national forests, but also in wildlife reserves and other protected ecosystems. At least one animal species is already on the verge of extinction due to poisoning caused by cartel activities, and that means it's only going to get worse. But like I said before, cartels don't just use public land and poison animals, they also steal water, and they do it on a massive scale. In California, where droughts are happening more often and lasting longer, this is especially dangerous. Just in Antelope Valley alone, up to 3 million gallons of water disappear daily. It all goes to illegal farms. Now imagine how much water the whole state is losing. The water gets stolen from different sources. Cartels tap into fire hydrants, pump it from wells, and sometimes just straight up steal it from farmers in the middle of the night. Then the stolen water gets loaded into tanker trucks and hauled off to where the crops are. When it comes to the consequences, they don't stop at water theft and shortages for others. Researchers say water pollution's widespread, especially if the plantation is right over a stream or near its tributaries. The chemicals used in cultivation, including some incredibly toxic ones, seep into the soil and then into the water system. As a result, it's not just the water bodies that suffer. Fish and aquatic organisms are affected too. So now we're not just talking about harm to a single plot of land, it's spreading to the entire ecosystem. But there's another threat, wildfires. And of course, it's not just animals that suffer from them, but people too. Because beyond the mountains from many plantations lies Los Angeles, and this is one of the most densely populated areas in the US, home to 19 million people. According to environmentalists, 80 to 85% of all illegal marijuana on public lands is grown in California's national forests, and 4 of them surround Los Angeles. So every time cartels set up their crops in the state's dry federal forests, they're putting millions of people at risk, and the risks are huge. Since the growers live on the plots for months, they bring everything that could cause a fire. Cigarettes, stoves with open flames, firewood. Sometimes they even deliberately set the forest on fire. At least 13 wildfires over the past 12 years have been directly linked to illegal marijuana grows. Just one of them, the 2020 Dolan fire in Los Padres, burned 123,000 acres. And in total, since 2009, fires caused by illegal grow operations have destroyed at least 272,000 acres of California forest. But according to the Forest Service, the real number is much higher. Pinpointing the exact cause of a fire is often impossible, and most cases fly under the radar. But there's another problem. The seasons overlap. The marijuana growing season coincides with peak wildfire season, and this stretches resources thin. As a result, the police, who are supposed to crack down on plantations, end up helping evacuate people and fighting fires instead. But plantations aren't just dangerous for animals and nature, they're also dangerous for the people who work there. Thousands of workers, mostly migrants, end up in the forests of Northern California and Southern Oregon under the control of criminal gangs. Many are lured in with promises of decent conditions and good pay, but once they arrive, they find out things are completely different. Instead of the image of peaceful cannabis communes left over from the 70s, people see fences, security, guard dogs, and guns. Outside the perimeter, total isolation. Inside, dirty plywood shacks with no running water, showers, or toilets. The temperature at night can drop below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and snow lingers in the forest until April. The living conditions are inhuman. Some workers sleep in trailers with unvented propane heaters and die from carbon monoxide poisoning. Others have their passports, visas, and phones taken away and are held until the harvest is over. And since cartels run the show, escaping the plantation or talking to the police means a death threat for the person and their family. There are cases where workers aren't paid at all. One man from Spain, for example, was promised $120,000 but ended up getting just $300. When he demanded his pay, they opened fire on him. The guy barely escaped and hid in the woods for days before making it out, and he was lucky, because many plantation workers vanish without a trace. Due to the vast terrain, bodies are often never found, which even worries the Trinity County District Attorney. He straight up says the wilderness could be hiding a lot. Mass graves, hundreds of people slaving away, no one knows for sure, because patrolling these woods is nearly impossible. As for the workers who manage to leave the plantations alive, they're afraid to complain, because if you end up on the farm's blacklist, you won't earn a single cent afterward, and many just have nowhere else to go. The legalization of marijuana in California, which took effect in 2016, didn't stop the cartels. On the contrary, their interest only grew. We're talking about a market worth tens of billions of dollars, and criminal syndicates don't want to miss out. Now, not just Mexican, but also Chinese and Cuban crime groups are using legalized states as cover to supply marijuana where it's still banned. They still grow marijuana secretly because it's cheaper, no taxes, no workplace safety rules, no environmental checks. They can pay workers next to nothing or not pay at all, just using threats. And all that drives down the cost of the final product. Plus, criminals aren't limited by geography. Licensed shops can't sell outside the state, but cartels can. They ship their harvest to places where marijuana is still legal and rake in the profits. And now, growing isn't just happening in the forest. In 2018, authorities carried out a massive operation in the Sacramento area. Searches took place in 74 homes linked to marijuana cultivation. As a result, asset forfeiture lawsuits were filed, worth millions of dollars. Just so you understand, we're talking about regular houses where normal families could have lived. But instead, they set up production there, and the buildings just can't take it. In one of these cases, the officers fell through a rotten floor. In others, they found melted wires, burned out electrical panels, and signs of makeshift hookups to the city grid. In some places, the criminals had chipped away at the foundation to illegally tap into electricity just to avoid paying for power. This not only saves money, but also keeps the house off the radar. After all, the electricity consumption for growing marijuana is insane. Houses like these are popping up all over states where weed is legal. Cartels lease or snap up hundreds of properties, making them look like normal residences. In El Paso County alone, reporters have recorded tons of these incidents. On top of that, a narcotics officer shared that fires are a regular thing in these places. Just imagine the danger for the people stuck working in those conditions. Federal agencies estimate that transnational organizations are especially active in states like California, Colorado, and Washington. Do you know why? Because truly controlling the industry just isn't possible. It's in these states that criminals find it easiest to blend into the legal system, meaning they can ship drugs across the country without a problem. You have to fight this somehow, but you can't forget about the need to restore forests after the cartel's activities. Unfortunately, that also requires a massive amount of effort and money. For example, in just one section of the Cleveland National Forest, they collected almost 1.5 tons of trash in a single day, over 1 mile of irrigation pipes, more than 1,100 pounds of fertilizer, and dozens of bottles of banned pesticides. Some pieces of trash were so big they had to be airlifted out by helicopter. And that was just one of over 40 sites cleaned up in California's national forests in 2021. The average cost for this kind of work is around $40,000 per site. And that's not even including hazardous waste disposal. But even such large-scale operations are just a drop in the ocean. There are too many illegal plantations, and the damage they cause is absolutely massive. So while some are clearing forests after the cartels, others are trying to prevent new plantations from popping up. For example, legal producers are also joining the fight. Over last year alone, they funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into the state budget. About 20% of taxes from growing and selling marijuana go toward environmental protection. Still, the problem hasn't gone away. Cartel operations continue. In September 2024, a 2-day operation went down in Sacramento County. Over 36,000 marijuana plants were seized in the southern part of the county. They were found on 10 plots that authorities say were tied to a drug cartel. The grow sites were in hard-to-reach areas. Some crews had to be airlifted in by helicopter. To hide the illegal plants, they were grown among legal crops like corn. The thick stalks perfectly covered up the forbidden stuff. Unfortunately, completely eradicating illegal marijuana cultivation in California hasn't been possible yet, but there's good news. According to regional wildlife specialist Morad Gabriel from the Forest Service, it can be done, but only with stable and sufficient funding. By his estimates, fully solving the problem would take $20 to $23 million over 5 to 8 years. But in 2021, Gabriel says only about 10 to 12% of that amount was allocated each year. Still, if the resources are there, the work will pay off. Gabriel points out, once an area is cleared and restored, growers usually don't come back. That's why more funding is so crucial. It's not just a temporary fix, but a lasting way to undo what the cartels have done to the forests and keep it from happening again. You owe me a like. See you later.